The phone conversation between fantasy veterans Bob Harris and Matt Waldman is a quick and dirty rundown of players, units, or teams from Sunday's games. Feel it or fuck it is our instant verdict on the fantasy value of a player or situation, not the ability, effort, or character of the player. This is just how two old-timers in this industry talk when they got a lot to cover in a little time.
Matt Waldman, good morning. Here we are, the middle of July, or nearly the middle of July, and Tyreek Hill has not gone fishing again. That's great news. There's not a lot of news, but there is a little bit. How are you this fine day, sir?
I'm doing really well, considering the fact that my bonehead needs to get like something for the back seat of my car because the dog keeps tearing through seat belts like it's like him just showing off that he's got sharp teeth.
Well, he should show those off. They're very nice to you. He's a fine young man. Not sure about all these complaints.
3 seat belts in 2 weeks, my man.
Well, okay.
3 seat belts in 2 weeks.
just because I have no idea. What does the seatbelt replacement run a man in this day and age?
Let's put it this way. I was really hoping to buy a brand new saxophone mouthpiece, or maybe a vintage one that was like really high end, and now I'm paying for the second and third seatbelt repair. It's about $300 with another $300 of labor. So he's got to get a job. Summer job is in the works right now. So anybody needs someone to help track deer with them. He doesn't respond well to guns though. So that might not be good. So unless we can find someone who kills deer with buck knives, and sneaks up on them like they're an old school,
a lot of bow hunters
warrior.
out there. A lot of bow hunters.
He might do well with bow hunting. He might do pretty well with that.
A lot of those out there.
Find Ted Nugent. There we go.
He would be one of them. A lot of people out there hunting for values at running back, and we've all talked ourselves into the notion that Javonte Williams is not going to be ready for the start of this season. Javonte Williams would like us to know that he expects to be ready for the start of training camp. As I said this weekend, that's the plan. I feel like I'm ready to go. If he asked if he would feel like he would be medically cleared for the start of camp, Javonte Williams, feel him or fuck him at this point.
Fuck that rhetoric. I'll believe it when I see it, in the same way that I was ready for J.K. Dobbins, and I heard that Javonte Williams has had a fairly difficult one too, and J.K. Dobbins bristled at the idea that he wouldn't be ready, and then he learned his lesson about midway through the year and pretty much said so. So yeah, I don't believe it until it actually happens.
Right. So that being the case, what are we doing with Samaje Perine? I think the value is there. He's not overly expensive on either of the best ball platforms. I feel like people think Javonte Williams is coming back. Are we maybe overplaying that notion, or are we maybe underplaying the notion that this will be a split no matter what?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fairly decent split. And the idea, had Dwayne McFarland on an RSP cast about a week and a half ago, and he brought up the idea of really, and I think he mentioned that Sean Payton said that there's a little bit of Pierre Thomas to what they've got with Samaje Perine, and I think that's an accurate assessment. If things don't go well for Williams, it's going to be Perine as the lead back, but then they've got a couple of speedsters to think about, like Tyler Beatty and Jaleel McLaughlin, the UDFA, and I'd put my money on McLaughlin in that case, as being the more talented option who could be game ready in a Philip Lindsay sort of mold to offset the what do you call it, the earth moving construction vehicle that is Samaje Perine. But if Williams is healthy enough to go, I still think you're going to see probably a fairly even split in the red zone between those two, and you're going to see some third down love for Perine because he is a reliable receiving back who can block, and I think that they may want to take Williams off the field or use them situationally. So I think it's going to be a little bigger split than people anticipate, and that gives Perine, I think, running back 3, running back 4 value right now.
Yeah, I think that's where you're. Actually, I'm looking at the latest underdog numbers of best ball ADP. Perine up to running back 35, which I think is probably right about where he should be going, and still behind Javonte Williams, who's running back 29. Maybe people hoping for a late season run. I think people are starting to feel the same about Breece Hall. Look, we're getting a lot of smoke signals out of the New York area. A lot of interest in Dalvin Cook being discussed, although maybe some of this is, and by some of this I mean all of this, is coming from the agents who represent one Dalvin Cook, this talk of interest in him. But that the Jets are still talking about him. It's interesting. All the teams, that have been mentioned prominently with Cook are the AFC East teams. So just in general, though, this Breece Hall, when all the talk of Dalvin Cook was going on, he put out a tweet with just a picture of a note being taken, So he's paying attention to this. The reporting has been pretty positive on him. Are you feeling him as an earlier round pick, or are you passing on him altogether?
I know other people who are feeling that, who have that medical background, who do injury reporting, but my point of view remains similarly cautious. I'm more fuck that, because I've been projecting Breece Hall at 10 games as a starter. And I think that that's a good conservative estimate. And it's not because he won't be ready week one. I just think about, even if he's ready week one, he is a very hard-cutting, creative, dynamic mover who leans a lot on quick twitch movement that's kind of at the razor's edge of maintaining your balance and really hard planning, hard cutting. And when you are a back who has had that kind of injury he had, it's not the physical that you got to worry about. It's the psychological of trusting that knee enough to do those things. And very rarely do we ever see that. Now, the one exception where we've seen that was with one of the most violent cutting creative backs ever in Adrian Peterson, in terms of, what he would do with jump cuts and lateral cuts. But I think with Hall, who is very much relying on that, it's hard for me to trust a back to play more than 10 games year one coming back from an ACL tear, because I just don't think he's going to trust it, and it's going to wind up leaning to some sort of, complementary, issue with an injury, one of those injuries where you get a sprained ankle or a muscle, tear, things like that. Compensatory. Thank you. It's Monday, and I've been trying to think of the word, and I appreciate you helping me out there. Yeah, it's seatbelt. That's all I'm thinking about right now is seatbelts.
So that being the case, and current ADP on Best Ball or on Underdog is running back 11. I'm looking at some of the backs going around him. I would rather have Josh Jacobs, who's going the running back before. Najee Harris is growing on me a little bit, Matt. Travis Etienne is not. Jahmyr Gibbs, I will pound the table for him every damn day. So there's some values out there, but I know we've talked about Israel Abanikanda a little bit in the past. I think he's in the 60 range. What about Michael Carter?
I think he gets forgotten a fair bit. I mean, maybe they just don't want a smaller back, but the dude runs tough. He's one of the better route runner receiving backs that's come out of the draft in the past 5 years. I think he can get the job done. And I think Abanikanda is a promising player, but I think he's a year or two away from really taking over a big-time role for the Jets if they needed him.
Israel Abanikanda currently running back 67. Michael Carter currently running back 72. I have way more shares of the latter than I do the former. And I have a lot of shares of Michael Carter I drafted early on before the NFL draft. And I'm starting to feel a little better about it again. I do think he's an overlooked commodity. So I'm feeling that. And it's not like fuck Abanikanda. I think he might be okay. But to me, he seems like somebody the beat writers are mentioning a lot to get ahead of something should it happen. And there's a lot of that goes on this time of year. You'll be surprised to learn, Matt Waldman. We had a fascinating tweet this week, I felt, by Will Brinson of CBS Sports, in which he ranked the quarterbacks in 7 tiers. Top tier, I don't think anyone would argue with the players on it. We might argue about the players not on it. Tier 1 is Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and Josh Allen. Tier 2 includes Jalen Hurts. Is he in the wrong tier?
I think from a fantasy perspective, he is in the wrong tier. I think from a football perspective, I think that you can make the argument that he's just below, because as a passer, he's good, but is he great? And I would argue that really Burrow, Allen, and Mahomes might be a tier above everybody at this stage. And that's no shame to Hurts' game. He's really close.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with this. I think the common trend for at least two of those players, for me, Mahomes and Burrow for sure, and maybe Josh Allen's getting there too. Maybe I'm selling him short in this regard. Is that aspect that we saw with Tom Brady, where you essentially have a coach on the field, right? A guy that's so steeped in the offense and well versed in what's going on and understanding the defenses, etc., that he gives you that extra, that extra kind of coaching perspective on the field. And I think that will come for Hurts for sure. I just think we're not quite there, maybe in the process just yet for him. The other guys on tier two, I don't have a huge argument here. Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, and Lamar Jackson. Any arguments there? Anything? Any major complaints?
None at all. I like all of them in that tier. I think that's an excellent place for them all to be. And I would argue that with a good system around him, Lamar Jackson could have the same argument that Jalen Hurts would have. I think Trevor Lawrence, obviously another year from now,
Yep.
if he does what he did, he might have that argument. So, and who was the other guy that we met? Justin Herbert. Same thing. We saw the start to his career. I mean, again, these are all guys that you could make the argument for them being tier one guys, but the way that Will put it out there, I think he tiered it perfectly.
Yeah, I think Justin Herbert, the issue for him is taking a minor step back last year, regardless of what the reasons were. There was an injury. There were injuries around him. There were, offensive line problems as well. So what do we remember? We remember the last thing we saw. And the last thing we saw was Justin Herbert falling a little short of our expectations. I'm feeling a rebound, Matt Waldman. I definitely am. The next tier, it's a big tier. It's the huge tier. There are a couple big tiers here. Tier three, Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, I thought was interesting. Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Fields included there. Danny Dimes up there with this group as well. Daniel Jones, Deshaun Watson, and Russell Wilson. You feeling Russell Wilson as a tier three quarterback?
Yeah, in fact, I think that if he does what he did for most of his career, he'll be in tier two. So will Aaron Rodgers. I think, Matthew Stafford deserves to be in that tier three. He's really, if he could have stayed healthy, he could easily play like a tier two, tier one type of player. Really more of a tier two player. He can be that. So I like all of those picks with the exception of maybe Justin Fields. It's more of a projection of where people think he will be, and I think he can be. And not Danny Dimes, I can kind of see him there. But Tua Tagovailoa, I don't know, man. I liked him, but I think he's more of a tier four guy with basically an elite tier set of wide receivers and an elite tier coach.
I think that makes sense, and it also makes sense on Russell Wilson. Just putting that in context that I mentioned, we remember the last thing we saw.
Yeah.
Last thing we saw, and actually, if we remember the last thing we saw, Russell Wilson was trending in a positive direction late last season. I think the coaching change, he is a bounce back candidate for me. Matthew Stafford, I hope he remains healthy. I think he'll be a huge producer as well. And Justin Fields, and if he makes a step forward, the step forward we expect or we're being told he's going to make as a passer. Nice things will happen, especially with additional weapons. We'll talk about one of those in a moment. Next tier would be the tier four: Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Geno Smith, Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill, Derek Carr, and Jimmy Garoppolo. I feel like one of these things is not quite like the others, but maybe I'm not giving Ryan Tannehill enough credit.
Yeah, I think Tannehill maybe at the bottom of that tier. Maybe he should be tier 5 at this point, but he's a competent. All those guys are competent quarterbacks with talent around them. I would argue that guys like Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff, and I think there was one other player on there who did. Dak, absolutely. Dak to me is unjustifiably low. I think this is a biased Cowboy fans kind of list. The kind of the complainer, the social media complainer Cowboys fans, and there's a lot of them. So I would
all of them.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm generalizing.
You live close enough to feel that radioactive behavior, but I would put Dak Prescott easily in tier 3, and I think this was and that would be if I'm conservatively saying that last year was a bad year for him, but I'd argue he's a tier 2 quarterback, and I would argue that Kirk Cousins is a tier 3 quarterback, And I would even maybe make the argument that Jared Goff is a low-end tier 3 quarterback, but we're okay. I'm okay with him at 4.
When I first saw this earlier this morning before we did this, I felt like tiers 3 and 4 were basically a big tier.
Yes.
And you can mix and match. And there are some guys that deserve it. I thought, like Ryan Tannehill, maybe Jimmy Garoppolo to me felt like they should be at the lower end of that. I'm still open to Geno Smith being the Geno Smith we saw last year.
That's who I forgot.
Right?
That's a great point. To me, I would put Geno Smith in tier 3 right now from what I've seen. Yep. And if anything, I would take Garoppolo and I would put him in tier 5. I think he's too high. I think he's been propped up by his offense, and that offense got tired of propping him up.
Find out if a new offense can prop him up, one that he's familiar with in Las Vegas. But I don't have any big arguments with any of that, and I feel like maybe tier 3 could have been way bigger and tier 4 could have been smaller. Tier 5 seems to be reserved for second-year players who have something still to prove, or younger players who have something else to prove. Mac Jones being the one, younger player. Kenny Pickett and Brock Purdy in this tier. I'll go ahead and throw out tier 7 because I want to set you up for the next bit. Tier 7 is the 3 rookies. It's Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and Anthony Richardson, who we will talk more about momentarily. And tier 5, the promising young players. I get it. Brock Purdy, we talked about him at length. I feel him as an ideal Kyle Shanahan factotum, a guy that gives Kyle Shanahan the processing he wants at quarterback. And so if that's, how you rank a quarterback, sure. Tier 6 is where it gets interesting. Sam Howell, Jordan Love, Baker Mayfield, Desmond Ridder, and Kyler Murray. How do you feel about Kyler Murray on this tier?
I feel good about Kyler Murray on this tier. In fact, all the other names you mentioned, I'd put them tier 7, and I'd take the 3 rookies that you just put and put them in tier 6 with Kyler Murray.
Fair enough.
But I feel fine with Kyler Murray, and I know that this was...
He loves it, by the way. Kyler Murray responded to a tweet about this with a love it. I'm feeling motivated.
Well, maybe that's a sense of maturity, or that's a social media manager, or it's the fact that, what he's figured out that... that he's got some problematic things going on.
Yes.
The Going Deep podcast that I started with Brandon Angelo over at Angelo FF, or Angelo Fantasy, excuse me. We both talked about Kyler Murray last week, and just the kind of the highlights were this: is that he obviously physically he is a tier 1 or tier 2 quarterback. Physically, he's able to do that. As a pure thrower of the football, tier 2 quarterback, no doubt. A mobility, absolutely there. Leadership, very questionable, not just because of the one thing that happened last year, but when you just look at him, the way that he responds to his own mistakes or issues with other players' mistakes, he tends to point fingers at other people. We saw that in Hard Knocks and practices. You see it on the field. You see him extending plays in ways that there's really no realistic way to expect his receivers to have to keep up with him for 8 seconds, or his offensive line to have to keep up with him for 8 seconds. He's not an efficient football player. And I think that the way he plays the game drops him enough that, maybe you could say it's being tough on him at tier 6. Maybe he should be a tier 4 or tier 5 guy. But I think when your teammates, Brandon made a good point saying that there's a good reason why DeAndre Hopkins didn't want to be in town, because when you're questioning DeAndre Hopkins for running a route on a ball that you didn't throw well, and you're grimacing and complaining and pointing fingers at the guy and asking him what happened, I'm sorry, but there are some receivers in this league you don't ask them what happened,
right?
And unless you've shown that you've studied the game well enough and don't need a clause in there that needs to ensure that. So, yeah, I get it. Even if ability-wise we expect him to be a tier 2 guy, I think how he's played is closer to tier 5, tier 6.
We see 2, annual collapses from the Cardinals, and both, look, I'm still going to contend these were more Kingsbury related than quarterback related. And maybe that's a big part of the problem for Kyler Murray. We all thought this offense was ideally suited for him. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe we'll never find out.
Maybe Colt McCoy will actually play well enough that they're going to try and trade away Kyler Murray to get themselves another quarterback.
Right. They're going to be really well positioned to draft next year. This seems to me, I mean, you can make an easy argument that the Cardinals are tanking, and there's a Caleb Williams waiting out there. If I'm Caleb Williams, I'm thinking, I'm not sure I want to be a first-round pick of the Arizona Cardinals. That track record is not great, but whatever. We'll see how that one plays out. I do think it's interesting. Look, I'm an older person, so, the way I view a lot of these issues, some of the issues you touched on, the leadership and the on-field behaviors and things like that, I have a certain view of. I don't know if that view is shared by current generation of players. I think it probably should be. And I think for a lot of them it is. Right. I think for a lot of them it is, but there are different attitudes from people. And so I just wonder if that's part of the issue for Murray. It's just, or maybe it's just, the other portion that we see with so many athletes, you're the top percentile, the narrow band, the 0.1% in terms of talent all throughout your younger portion of your career and your nascent years. And then you get to the NFL where there's like 10% of everybody is as good as you, right? And that's like a new thing, and maybe it's hard to deal with. So we'll see how this.
In hindsight, I think he wanted to be a baseball player, and he should have continued to pursue that route. But
I think overlooked point, totally. Yeah. I feel that as well. Some reporting, just I think it was today or yesterday in The Athletic, that maybe Anthony Richardson, though, who we mentioned, the three Tier 7, the rookies. James Boyd of The Athletic wrote, I think the biggest factor in Richardson starting week 1 will be improving his consistency during training camp and preseason. As I've previously written, Richardson would often make the best throw of rookie minicamp, OTAs, and veteran minicamp, but overall, his performance was turbulent. That will need to change in order for him to take the reins in the season opener. Are you feeling Anthony Richardson as a week 1 starter?
No, I'm not. I think that he's gonna get a chance to kind of sit on the bench and wait for anywhere between 4 to 6 games, and then I think they'll put him in. And I think that it's natural because what you're going to see from the beat writer's perspective is just results oriented. They're not going to tell you much about the process behind all of that. So with Richardson, just like I talked about in the RSP scouting report or the scouting report that you can find in the Football Diehards magazines that are now available on newsstands everywhere. You should definitely check them out. Yeah, over the shoulder right there. Yeah, right there. So when you check those out, what you're going to see in that scouting report is that the thought about that he's inexperienced. It's not that he lacks savvy or understanding of football. It's just he's less experienced with certain types of defenses that he hasn't had a lot of reps with. So you're going to see good reps, bad reps. You're going to see him try and get comfortable with what kind of decisions that he can and can't make as both a thrower, a decision maker, and an athlete. And that's going to mean that he's going to have some unbelievable highs, like some of the best throws you see in camp, and then you're going to see some lows that come out of that. But they're not the type of lows that you're going to look at and say 3 years later, oh, he's still making these mistakes and still can't see this stuff. It's more like you're going to see it this year and people are going to go, this guy can't play. And then 2 years later, you're never going to hear about these guys who said that again because they're going to keep their mouths shut because they realize that they're eating a really healthy sized dish of crow that's been dished out to them by a certain
love crow.
Yeah, there we
go. I'm feeling pulling the Band-Aid off. Throw them in there. Let them. And I realize, I mean, if you're totally outmanned or if you're totally not ready, I get that. I don't feel like he's not totally ready. I feel like this is a unique talent that you get him on the field and you let him play his way in. I think the most important factor for an NFL quarterback is that experience. And even if it's not great experience at first, I know I just my feeling, I feel like he's built to withstand this and learn from it and grow from it, where maybe we've seen others in the past who weren't ready for that or expected to come out great guns and didn't. But play this man. I want to see him on the field there.
If he was waiting 8, 10, 12, 14 games, I would agree with you. But to me, 4 to 6 games ain't nothing in your first season.
It's true. And Gardner Minshew, well-versed in the offense coming in, comes along with Shane Steichen from Philadelphia and has been, let's face it, more than serviceable on multiple occasions.
Which can help Richardson in the sense of like, he can play the mental game of quarterback on the field to see how Minshew approaches things mentally, from an experienced quarterback standpoint, and just get a little bit more confidence about just the little things where he's not going to make grand mistakes with little issues, and then they'll insert him in once they feel like he's comfortable enough on that end.
I think there are a lot of people drafting him as though he will be the week 1 starter. That's my feeling in many drafts that I'm in. And some of you out there are doing the Scott Fish Bowl, you'll see him go very early. I get why. That's like a tournament, right? So it's same with best ball. You're season long. I'm probably going to take a little different approach, but for some of these where you're trying to be a little bit different or swinging really big, I still think he's a nice swing.
Yes.
Tank Dell getting so. Again, we're at that point of year where we're getting some positive comments about players. I suggest anyone, when you see these positive comments, you go see where they sprung from. Generally speaking, somebody is asking a question about these players, and nobody's going to slag on them. But Tank Dell is interesting. Apparently, a very good route runner. The depth chart in Houston, look, we've talked about Nico. Yeah, we've talked about Nico Collins at length, and I think he'll be fine. But I don't know that he's a locked-in, high-end threat, right? So we'll see. There's some meat on that bone and room to grow. Are you feeling Tank Dell as a rookie contributor?
I am totally feeling that. And does it mean that he's going to be a high-end fantasy player? I'm not quite sure yet. And the reason is that, like you said, he is a terrific route runner. Great quickness, great feet, really good at being able to get off the line of scrimmage. He's creative. He can earn position to win the ball. He does everything from the line of scrimmage up to where the ball's in the air in front of him at the level of a future starter, maybe even an immediate starter. Where you start to worry about him a bit is with those targets where they maybe need to be contested, or he has to earn position on the ball and make adjustments, and the hands aren't where they need to be. And then it's a little bit of an adventure with him, kind of like Romeo Doubs in that department. So Dell, if they use him, he's going to have production as that gadget, throw out, short yardage, crossing route type of player who's going to get a lot of yardage after the catch on some, or at least have some big plays like that. The big question is whether he can be the primary guy who can win those contested catches and be kind of more of a Deshaun Jackson kind of, young Deshaun Jackson in terms of that ability. And if he can do that, he could be one of the best receivers in this rookie class in terms of production year 1. But I'm not anticipating that. And, you still have John Mechie if he's healthy enough.
Yep.
He's an interesting player, though his hands
Robert
can be a little iffy. Xavier Hutchinson has great hands. If he can show that he has some speed, he might surprise. And, so you still got Robert Woods, and Robert Woods is handy at this point, even if he may not be the Woods that we saw in the past.
I blame you for fueling my many shares of Hutchinson.
Well, I hope you got him late. I'll just say
very late, last round.
Then you're
picks.
okay. Then you're okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Magic beans right now,
but he will be on my rosters for the next 10 years. So whether he does anything or not, because that's how it works.
He's got a good name. There you go.
Yes, I'll take it. So KJ Osborn, another of these players that we heard some positive discussions about, again, probably in response to a question. That said, the Minnesota Vikings offense, they throw a lot, 65% of the time last year. Justin Jefferson with 184 targets, Adam Thielen over 100 targets. KJ Osborn got 90 targets last year. Granted, TJ Hawkinson didn't show up until a little late for the party, and he ended up with 86. Are you feeling KJ Osborn as a potential fantasy contributor?
As a potential one, I'm feeling that if the potential is based on the parameters of either Hawkinson or Jalen Addison getting hurt, and now they need to use him as the third option in a powerful offense. That works. Otherwise, as the fourth option, which is most likely how he'll be, he may have some big games for you as a bye week option here and there when the matchup's right, but I'm not counting on that. So he's draftable, but he's not a guy that I would be considering as a starter anytime until something changes in Minnesota as described.
Darnell Mooney says he's ready for training camp. Had the ankle injury last year, cut his season short, just had 40 catches, 493 yards. But the year before, he was very good, right? Career high, 1,055 yards. So a big season. The addition of DJ Moore lets Mooney work as the number 2, which seems like the natural role for him, Matt. We are hoping Justin Fields makes a leap ahead. Are we overlooking Darnell Mooney in our drafts this year?
Potentially, I think that's the case because, like you said, 2 years ago he played very well. And if the ankle injury was really bothering him and he was having to work through it all year long, that could have really derailed him from from being able to contribute at the level that he's capable of. And now that he isn't the number one guy overall, that is going to be helpful. He in the sense that maybe last year he had to be on the field in order to be a decoy to some extent. So if that's the case, I'm still holding on to Mooney shares in dynasty leagues where I've been able to get him, where I got him off the waiver wire when he was a free agent. But I'm not necessarily making him a priority draft pick, but I'm more than happy with probably where he's going ADP wise to make an investment late.
Current ADP 125 on the underdog, that puts him in wide receiver 58. So
Easily.
You're getting him in double-digit rounds. That said, there are guys going after him named Nico Collins, who I don't know how you feel about the comparison there. But then there's another one also going after him. That would be Adam Thielen, who we're hearing is going to be the Panthers wide receiver 1. First of all, feeling Adam Thielen producing as a true NFL or performing as a true NFL wide receiver 1 in this Panthers offense, or is this an indictment instead of the Panthers offense and maybe what we should expect? By the way, Adam Thielen, wide receiver 64, ADP 143.
Another guy I've been holding on to, and I'm totally feeling him as a wide receiver 1 because he can run routes. And I don't think that he slowed down that much. I think that they just tried to beef up the offense in different ways in Minnesota, and he is getting older, and they probably feel like that's better to come off of that asset early rather than get caught with him while it's too late. I think he's got another year in him, and he can produce. Maybe as a wide receiver 1 for the Panthers, that will translate. But maybe from a fantasy perspective, we're looking at 1,000 to 1,100 yards, and that's not a fantasy wide receiver 1 material. It's more of a mid-range wide receiver 2.
Right, all the pieces there, including DJ Chark going even cheaper, and I think Jonathan Mingo's actually going ahead right now, which may be a little bit of a reach. People, be careful there. Might be a trap. Also, sometimes these traps are these great offenses coming off great seasons. Detroit Lions, one of those, Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's embracing the hype, he says, Matt, heading to the 2023 season. Are you embracing the hype? Feel it or fuck it, sir?
I'm feeling it for the offense. Fuck it for the team. Because until that defense gets turned around, it's really an all offense. It's like a 1970s, 1980s Denver Nuggets, if you were a basketball NBA fan, where they were just scoring like crazy but had no defense whatsoever. This is this team at this point, unless the guys getting healthy or the young players that they acquired can make a key difference on that unit in a manner that we did not anticipate. But overall, from an offensive perspective, absolutely, with Laporta and St. Brown, adding to that list Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, you've got 4 weapons just right there who are fine. And Marvin Jones, again, kind of an Adam Thielen type, maybe a year or two beyond that right now, who can be a capable wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 in the right offense, and coming home to Detroit probably to finish his career there. I think that he's a versatile player until Jameson Williams can get back and maybe show something, other than what the odds are at the betting window.
Hey, now, easy now, old fella. These kids, they got things going on their phone. You'd be surprised to learn.
Oh, is that's what this thing?
You have one of those. You're all right.
Yeah, I got one. Okay.
All right. I don't think we spend as much time gambling as some of the kids do, though. Maybe we do, actually.
I do with my life, but that's about it.
All right, I'm feeling that, and feeling we will be back next week to do this all over again and find some interesting, exciting topics to roll through. Maybe someone will put out a tiered ranking of fantasy analysts we can go over. Fuck that. I'm not sure I'm going to fare well with that one. All right.
I think they do that every day. It's called Twitter. I think that's
happens. Are you out there on the threads, Matt? Have you jumped on the threads?
I have jumped. I'm on the threads, MattWaldmanRSP.net. Is that what, or threads.net or something like that?
Yeah, I'm at Football Diehard. I feel like threads is at that point like where Twitter was in 2009, where it feels like, I'm going to date myself here. It's like the end of the old Walton show where everyone says good night to everybody at the end of the night, or that like kind of homey, quaint feel, and pretty soon, once all the bots
Look,
get there, the angry people get there, it's all going to
look,
turn
douchebag turd sandwich, douchebag turd sandwich.
Right,
If you're viewing one in one light, you got to view the other in the other light, or you
Feel
can just
that.
say, I don't really care either way, and I'm just trying to live my life and help people where I can. But to me, it's like, if you prefer one or the other, that's
Go get you some.
your taste. I'm not gonna abstain, but I'm just gonna hold my nose through the whole thing.
Feeling all of that. Love you, Matt. Goodbye.
Love you too.